And thank you for joining the Northern Virginia Technology Council for our virtual Masters of Leadership Series, a new season of leaders event. Please welcome Greg Baroni, the chairman of NVTC and the founder and CEO of Attain.
I am delighted to welcome you to today's event featuring the Chief Information Officer for the Department of Homeland Security, the Honorable Karen Evans, and Kevin Phillips, ManTech Corporation's Chairman, President, and Chief Executive Officer. The Masters in Leadership Series is made possible by our sponsors, Appian and Attain, our platinum sponsors, and silver sponsors, CNSI and Micron Technology. Thank you for all your support. And what I'd like to do now is introduce our new NVTC President and CEO, Jennifer Taylor, who will introduce our speakers today. Jennifer?
Thank you, Greg. It's my privilege to introduce today's distinguished guests. We have the Honorable Karen Evans, who is the Chief Information Officer at the Department of Homeland Security with us today. She is responsible for strategically aligning the department's information technology, personnel, resources, and assets, including security, infrastructure, and delivery, to support core DHS missions and activities. Previously, she served as the first Assistant Secretary for Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response for the U.S. Department of Energy. She provided strategic direction, leadership, and management to address emerging threats while improving energy infrastructure security and supporting the DOE National Security Mission. Prior to being named Assistant Secretary at the DOE, Karen was the National Director of the U.S. Cyber Challenge, a public-private partnership focused on building the cyber workforce. She also served on the Trump transition and landing teams to develop the management agenda addressing technology initiatives government-wide. Our moderator today is ManTech Corporation's Chairman of the Board, President and CEO, Kevin Phillips. Kevin leads a global team of 9,300 employees who are committed to national and homeland security through the delivery of innovation solutions and technologies that solve some of our nation's most challenging problems. Kevin was appointed chairman in September of 2020, in addition to serving as the CEO and president of ManTech since January 2018. Prior to that, he served as the president and COO from 2016 to 2018. He also served as CFO from 2004 to 2016 and has been corporate vice president and assistant to the chairman and chief of staff. He joined the company in 2002 through ManTech's acquisition of CTX Corporation. Kevin is NVTC's second vice chair of the board of directors as well. So now, before I turn it over to Kevin and Karen, Bobby Kilberg, NVTC's president and CEO emeritus, would like to say a few words. Bobby?
Hi, good morning, everybody. Karen, I want to join in thanking you for being our presenter today at our NVTC Masters of Leadership Series. We've been friends for a very long time, and I have personally observed your impressive experience, your great talents, and your commitment to enhancing the importance and power of the CIO role at our most critical departments and agencies. Thank you and welcome. It's all yours, Kevin.
Thanks, Bobby. And thanks, Greg and Jennifer, for the introduction today. And I'm pretty excited to be moderating today's panel because we do have Karen Evans with us today, and she is the DHS of CIO. DHS has the largest civilian agency budget for IT. So it's pretty exciting to talk. And Karen, thank you for joining us today and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I was listening to your new promotion and your bona fides here. You have quite an impressive background as well. So maybe I should be interviewing you in this fireside chat.
No, I still have the CIO title to get someday, so you'll have to teach me that. So.
Oh, okay. And thank you, Bobby, for inviting me. And she's right. We've been friends for a long time. And she's leaving out the part where she's helped and mentored me along the way. as well. So, and I'm sure I'm not the first person who has said that about Bobby.
Absolutely. She is definitely well known in our industry, and we're happy to have her staying involved with NVTC despite her retirement. So, Karen, DHS has an important set of responsibilities, very broad number of agencies in it. Now that you've had a chance to orient yourself within DHS, what do you see as the biggest IT and mission priorities for DHS and its components?
Well, I don't think I'm going to surprise anybody by this answer, which is we have a diverse portfolio, but the mission is clear, which is defend the homeland. And so when we take a look at that, how the different components are doing different parts of that mission is what's critical, and then the ability for the department to be able to support that overall. And I think what you're seeing right now, especially with us, like I was just thinking, I don't get to normally you could make the argument, ooh, I'm stuck in traffic, even though I was on a meeting. So now it's like you have to run down the hall and start up the video conference. You can see that the capabilities of what the CIO shop has to maintain for the component organizations are also very critical, because our reliance on the network and unclassed video conferencing, and then our threat landscape has changed. All of that is important as the department continues to maintain its mission. And you know, we have the response. You see what's happening. We had, you know, we were into Greek letters for hurricane naming that we haven't seen. I can't remember how long that's been. We have the pandemic COVID response that is also FEMA and election security, which is CISA. You know, we have very many different types of missions, but the one thing that is critical is that they have to stay operational 24/7.
Sounds like a very big job.
It is a big job, but it is a partnership with all the component organizations as well. And that is one thing that I made sure I tried to make sure. It's a little unique here, because trying to go around and visit people and physically visit with them is a little bit more of a challenge, but making sure that we have interaction with the component CIOs and making sure that that contact is happening, and how we are making use of the CIO council internally here within the department. I've been trying to make sure that that communications line is open.
Excellent. So you are a very well-established and excellent leader. How do you apply your leadership and your principles in leadership towards this new role? It seems like it is fairly broad. It's a challenge. Interested to know how you apply your leadership style to the role you're in.
So probably if you had asked me that question like 10, 15 years ago, it'd be totally different. But the other part of it, which is really pretty interesting, is Jennifer mentioned the U.S. Cyber Challenge as work that I was doing in that partnership. I was doing that for 10 years, and it's all virtual. It's all done virtual with everyone volunteering. We all had like day jobs that we were doing stuff, but everybody was committed to a common outcome. And working with the people here at DHS, that common outcome and defending the homeland, that mission is ingrained in everybody, or they wouldn't be here. So that's the easy part. Like that sense of getting to the common outcome and securing the homeland for the American people. You don't have to like create something like we did with the U.S. Cyber Challenge about, you know, why you needed to have workforce and why you needed to create a pipeline and why you had to have this partnership. So the why part is done. Like everybody's bought into that part. It's so that the team here within headquarters, the actual OCIO component, part of that, it's huge. It's huge in comparison to the other lines of business that are here in the management component. So it's listening to the team, really working with the other lines of business and understanding what they are trying to accomplish and where the CIO organization complements that. And then the other part is my leadership, understanding exactly what the leadership, the outcomes and the capabilities that they want to have and that they want to continue to maintain. So the DUSN, the Deputy Undersecretary for Management, Mr. Alice, he was very clear on what the outcome was. The Secretary was very clear. The DevSec was very clear on different aspects of this job and being then able to articulate that back to the team so that we could meet their expectations, and we continue to meet their expectations. But the other part of it is that the team had already risen to the occasion and pivoted, right? And so they were providing services at a new level and not missing a beat. So the other part that was really nice, it's very rare when you get to come into an organization and everybody is complimenting the CIO organization. I know you have gone, or you've helped other companies where they go in and that's not the case, where the CIO organization may not necessarily be the best at delivering customer service to other parts of the organization. And here, everybody was very grateful and understood how the pivot of going from 5,000 concurrent connections a day on the VPN to 120,000 in a day, and everybody maintaining that connectivity
Securely.
Yeah, exactly. And what it's done is it's raised the service level and the expectations now of the level of service that everyone now is expecting, given the environment that we're in. So that's a nice aspect of it. So you're kind of like, oh, okay. So now how do I maintain that and maintain the focus, and then also create a team in a virtual environment?
That's a tremendous feat. That 5,000 to 120,000. That's a busy day.
Yeah, and it's huge, right? But a lot of the things that my predecessors have done, you really got, and these are big concepts, right? Like you hear about, oh, we have to do network modernization, or we have to reform procurement because we have to have the right clauses. Like we shouldn't be paying for the surge. We should pay as we surge up, and then be able to go back down like a subscription service. So getting the right clauses in that is partnership with our procurement office. And so a lot of this stuff has come to reality about what did you mean by network modernization? Well, this is what we meant by network modernization. What did you mean by procurement reform? Well, this is what was meant because the right terms and conditions are in the contract that allow us to do that. So people are experiencing, what does it mean to migrate to the cloud? Well, now the applications, everybody can access those. And how that works. But to your point, the security piece of that and maintaining the security posture and moving into the accelerating things of what we're doing with the cloud, that has changed the whole security posture for the department as a whole also.
Right. And I assume the cloud migration is one of the more important aspects of what you're doing today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then prioritizing and looking at what applications, but beyond that, it's creating new applications because of where we are. So for example, one of the new applications that we're looking at, and this gets back into the components, is everyone has a piece of this, which is dealing with the things associated with contact tracing, right? And so we're very focused on contact tracing as it relates to the contractors who support us and our employees. And so based on that, there's other pieces, but people have different requirements. Components have different requirements. And now we're layering on top of that, okay, so what are the critical services, right? And then how do you layer on distribution of vaccinations and then marry that with public health information in that geographical area so that we can start doing some predictive analysis about being able to shift supplies based on business need.
So speaking of the pandemic, because we're talking about contact tracing, it's been quite the year on a number of fronts. Interested to know how the DHS components, as well as the people within DHS, have fared during the pandemic, and what you've done to broadly address that.
So the department as a whole follows, depending on what state you're looking at, right? We're following the guidelines for the state. In my organization, in the management directive and the way that the management directive has been sending out overall policies throughout the department about dealing with the workforce, it's flexible. It is flexible, but the department itself has never shut down as it relates to that. I gave you the example about the shift. Within a 3-week period, they shifted so that the workforce could go virtual. There is a certain amount of the workforce that has to come on site. And that's because if you're dealing in a classified environment, some of that work has to be done on site. But even the intelligence component, right, the INA component within the department has shifted their work. I mean, like, who would have thought that they would be able to shift their work and be able to do things in a way so that they could telework, right? And then have limited contact coming into the office during this. And so we've been very flexible. We really have asked the family, people to really look at their family situation. We have not said, you know, like, I'm new. I didn't say everybody has to come to the workforce. People are coming in based on the work demand and at their own pace, also based on their own home situation. And so we're making sure we're taking all those proper precautions because, as you know, here in the district, right, we have multiple states that we have to deal with as well as the district. And so that plan and how we are really looking at the balance of the work is really up to each component. And then that flexibility about how to be able to maintain this virtual environment while they're still doing their work. Now, I will tell you what I think is even more interesting is risk tolerance has changed, right? So, yeah, okay, so you're probably
for everybody.
Well,
it's
right,
amazing when the decision makers are home and the infrastructure supports it, what changes.
Yeah, and so there's been so many changes with the risk profile overall. So the one example that I like to give is, for example, when we were all on-prem, you didn't want people, when they were teleworking, to remote print. You didn't want them to use their own personal printers at home, just all kinds of things associated with that. But getting back to your leadership question, like, all of us look at things a little bit differently. Not all of us can write our notes directly onto the iPad and things like that. Like, some of us are more tactical, right? And have to read and look at paper so that we can absorb it. So the tolerance is a little bit higher, the risk tolerance. And so we're looking at solutions that would allow for actual remote printing at the house. But, okay, so then you have to say, okay, well, what kind of information are they actually printing? Are they going to take the right protections at home? I'm not into classified. I'm just like controlled but unclassified, right? And any of these classifications, and how are they taking care of that information? If you're going to allow for that to happen at home, then how are they taking the right information assurance precautions with information that they print out? So that's stuff that we're working through right now, because we don't know how quick everybody's going to come back on-prem.
Right. And advancements towards zero trust are moving very rapidly. So I do think it's a new normal. And, you know, along those lines, what is the new normal, and how do you envision that? And how do you view bringing the workforce safely back together? Or how much of them are going to work permanently remotely under the future structure of operation?
Well, and that's the questions that you're really looking at. And what does resilience really now have to look like under this new model? And does resilience then allow for the diffusion right across the infrastructure, to your point about allowing virtual connections and how you do certain things, and then zero trust? Because we were dancing around that with Internet of Things, but now we're forced to really think about how do you do that and how would you then secure it? I mean, the other thing that we're looking at, so I'll share this story. I was on board 3 hours, maybe 3 hours on my first day, and got a call, right, from the front office, from the secretary, because the unclassified video conferencing is important. And so the classified stuff works great, right? You're in a SCIF, it works, all of that works great. But unclass, this platform is constantly evolving. I think I heard today on the radio, there's a whole brand new platform out there that's that I'm not going to say the company, but it's allowing people to, to collaborate, right, in this type of environment. So we're going to see a lot of innovation and more platforms, right, going out, and people are using these. Well, I can't say, hey, as a DHS interaction, everybody has to, only interact with us on Microsoft Teams. Now, Microsoft would love that if I were to say that, because that was the choice that we made here at the department, but we know that's not the reality. So we have to really look at how that interconnection's working, trust but verify, all those free services, and then how do we monitor and how do we look at those interactions and what's happening so that we can secure things, right? So then the next level of questions, because we're looking at some of this methodology going forward, is what is really important to secure? Is it the capability to be able to make sure that you can do it regardless of what the platform is, or is it the content that's happening on that call? So we're erring a little bit more. This is why it's a use case, that it's the platform and the capability that is more important versus the content, because we're in an unclassed environment. And so we should be cognizant of other things that we're saying and who our audience is. So we're really looking at capability and then the interactions with these multiple platforms and what is the distribution associated with that.
Pretty busy. So along those lines, DHS has a very significant role and expanding role around cybersecurity, not just for civilian agencies, but also for the nation. And I'm curious to know what challenges you're seeing as cybersecurity is evolving within DHS and DHS's requirements around what we'll call all of nation defense expands as well.
So there's a lot in that question. Yeah, which is awesome. So you're giving me the opportunity to talk about our relationship with CISA and as a component. So I'm the departmental CIO who's responsible for oversight and CISA's investments and how they're managing the risk and everything associated with that. They're responsible for the outreach and then also federal government network. So they actually then turn around and give us guidance, right, on what we should be doing to secure the department's network. So it really is a very unique partnership going forward. So we're very excited about it. I do meet with them on a regular basis because our agreement of what we want to do since day one when I was here is we want to be the quintessential example to show out to the rest of the departments and agencies, like this is how it should work, right? Because it is a little bit unique as me being the departmental CIO, but the other part of it is like, if it's good guidance and it is the way to go, we want to show everybody this is how it's delivered. This is how you implement it. You know, these are the lessons learned that we had in working with all the components to be able to get this guidance implemented. So, for example, we're working really closely with them right now on the vulnerability disclosure program. The rest of the departments have that. Again, headquarters, the CIO got its own legislation dealing with vulnerability disclosure programs and bug bounty. CISA is putting that out through a policy dealing with the entire federal government. And so the idea then is we ran our pilot, but what we're working with CISA on is now how do I put that into a production environment, but really looking at their platform and utilizing the platform that they have in place to be able to then leverage it across all the components. So bug bounty for them is optional. Bug bounty for us, we're supposed to do that as well. So they have an optional piece on that. So that's the part that we're working out with them. And then because they're a component, which this shows the other interesting piece of this, because we had to go out as a department and do this earlier. I know everybody's going to be shocked, but vulnerability disclosure programs actually fall under the Paperwork Reduction Act. And so it's another process, right, where you have to look at what is the economic burden associated with collecting this information and how you're doing stuff because we're interacting with public. So the good news is we have done all of that, right? Because that's a necessary thing that you have to do. And because they're a component organization, they benefit from that. So therefore, everyone else who then uses the service through CISA actually has their Paperwork Reduction Act requirements covered. So this is one of these things where, you know, we have to do it as a government, private industry doesn't. But because of this relationship between us and CISA, it benefits the government as a whole.
Oh, that's interesting to hear. You're also working towards I think it's called a network operations security model, moving from a knock and a SOC concept. Can you explain what and why and how that's going to be beneficial going forward?
So this was started prior to me getting here under the leadership of the assistant, who's now the deputy CIO. She was the acting CIO, Ms. Capello. And what this really does is it takes into consideration a couple of the guidance things that have come out from OMB, which was looking at security operation centers and optimizing and consolidating security operation centers. That's that requirement in data centers, you know, consolidating and optimizing data centers. So several of these infrastructure types of analysis, when you look at it across the board, you can see where the redundancies are. But back to the original comment, what the piece is about keeping operations going. Yep. So, right. So when you look at a traditional security operations center and the way that it's focused on information technology systems, so I'm going to draw from my other experience here at Department of Energy. When you look at embedded technology or operational technology, those systems have to stay operational. So when you look at a SOC, when an incident occurs, they shut it down, okay? They stop a service because what they want to do is collect information, do the analysis, right? And then be able to package it up, whether you're doing preservation of evidence or whatever it is that needs to be done. But the service is offline. That's not how choice. Yeah, and you can't do that. Right. You can't do that, right? You have to be able to keep the operations going, be able to triage it. So think of it as a DHS model, an emergency room, you know, a fire, you can pull in any kind of analogy that you want. The first responders have to recognize what it is, be able to triage it, package it up, keep the operations going, and then pass it on up the line so that the analysis can happen with intelligence or law enforcement. But what I have to be focused on is keeping operations going. So that's the idea of the NOSC, right? And so it's network operations, security center. So it's going to keep both of those. So your tier 1, tier 2 people are going to be, you know, think of it as a joint operations floor. You have network and security people both there at the same time, so you can actually triage what is happening and then be able to move it, package it, send it over to the FBI, send it to CISA, send it to Intel, so that they can see, is it something specific to a component? Is it something that is pervasive throughout DHS, or is it even bigger that it's out with all the civilian networks?
And that's what you're starting to do, and it's going to pay big dividends going forward.
That's the goal. That's the goal, because we've already started moving toward that. The SOC optimization and the SOC assessments have been happening, and that it is intended for them to all be completed by the end of this calendar year in December. And then how some of them stay operational within a component, but here at headquarters, we have already made that consolidation, and now it's staffing it up and making sure we have the right mix of federal government employees to contractor employees in order to be able to manage it appropriately. Right.
And that broader site picture will have huge dividends if it works long-term from a national security.
It's when it works long-term.
Yes, when it works long-term.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. From your lips to God's ears. This is good.
There you go. It will work long-term.
So along with infrastructure, data is important. And I know that you all are looking for a chief data officer. Interested to know what's the purpose of the role? How is it going to be empowered? Is it going to be focused internally and externally and broadly around data? I mean, how is this going to play out within the department?
Okay, so yes, we are recruiting for a chief data officer. This is also in response to the Data Act, obviously, and the requirements associated with that. And so there's a lot in that question about how we envision that going forward. So there are some basic capabilities that deal with government management of information that's just going to happen, right? There's some of those types of things like records management, for example. We have to do that. It's not necessarily the same, the equivalent. You know, we have FOIA, a lot of things that private industry deals with is e-discovery, right? So these are the things that are similar. So we do see that the CDO, like, that's a necessary evil that they're going to have to deal with. But the other piece that we're looking at is that it's very joint with the Chief Technology Officer, because it's how do you use both of these, data and technology, to really empower the department to move forward to make informed decisions. So the two of them are going to be very joint in how they work and how they craft what the strategies are going to be going forward for the department. And data, so think about this, one of the things that we're really looking at has to deal with machine learning, right? Artificial intelligence. We also have a Chief Privacy Officer and a Chief Civil Liberties Officer that are separate offices within the department. And so all of that is partnership in how are we managing that data, how are we looking at that data from a mission specific piece, and then how are we ensuring privacy and civil liberties in partnership with these other offices. So that framework and how that goes forward, we really look at the Chief Data Officer as this is the area of growth. And then the other piece that everybody's used to seeing is underperformance.gov. So we have the other part, you know, associated with program evaluation and planning, which is in our CFO shop. So this is another area where the CIO and the CFO are going to be joined at the hip, not just between budgetary resources and budget planning, but also then the effective use of the data in the planning and evaluation parts of what is happening here within the department.
And the cloud migration is already happening naturally. This is something that falls underneath that.
Yes.
In relation to the data itself, not the platform that the data resides.
Yeah, it's not the platform, right? It's the ability and the capabilities. So that gets back to, you know, we're really analyzing the use of the data. And so this is a piece where I think a lot of departments and agencies are really taking a look at how does that marry up with technology. So we're not doing cloud migration for cloud migration's sake, right, but it's really taking a look at, I'm sure every department and agency has the same challenge. We have a lot of data and data stores in areas. Like, does it really make sense that they need to migrate because people haven't used them in a while? But then we need to be aware that they're still there, so that we may want to utilize some of that data for historical reference points, right? Like, everything doesn't necessarily have to migrate to the cloud. So a lot of that analysis, I'm back to, this is going to have to be jointly done between the Chief Technology Officer that I have, as well as the Chief Data Officer.
And that merges fairly nicely. You see that moving along pretty well?
Well, initially, the initial implementation, our Chief Technology Officer was our acting Chief Data Officer, and we got it to a point where we felt we were ready to do the recruitment for the Chief Data Officer, and so that's why you're seeing that out on the street. So there is a nice natural type of separation that then allows both of them to grow separately but together, yet integrated.
That's great. I think it's a big deal. Everybody's focused on the data, and I think it does matter. It's going to be interesting to know how it does blend together. It's going to be interesting to watch. So, you know, my general view, whether I'm talking to my own CIO or we're talking to other customers, is the CIO job is in some levels impossible. And by that, I'm saying, build me a transformational platform while saving me money on a fixed budget. And if anything goes wrong, somebody will find out and complain. Right, that's basically the job, and
that's
so
basically the job.
Yeah, well, I don't mean that negative. It's a hard job because it's really not appreciated as often, and I'm glad that your organization appreciates what's happening within your shop today. So within that framework, is there something that's like revolutionary or a big moonshot, either within the department or if you got it from industry, if people were investing in things that if you got it could really change the mission set and the outcomes of missions? is there anything transformational that comes to mind that would be beneficial to the components of DHS writ large?
So the way that you would ask your CIO that question in private industry, they can give a very different answer than a CIO in the federal government. So because you could standardize on a certain platform and you could realize efficiencies by standardizing on a certain platform, right? You would run a competition, but you wouldn't necessarily be subject to all the rules that govern a federal government competition. So you could make some key decisions in private industry that would make the CIO's job just a little bit easier, just a little bit I could project some of the savings and realize some of these cost avoidance into the future. And I do believe that CIOs in the private sector have the ability to really show how they aren't a cost center, right? Like they could actually show how they can add to the bottom line by enhancing mission capabilities and delivering certain value added services that then guarantee the ability that they can turn themselves into a profit center versus a cost center. So that's the kind of discussion that you want to have with your CIO, who then says, yes, and I'm also managing the rest of it. You know, you have to footnote certain things in your financial statements. And so those types of things along the lines like that. And I appreciate that because I've been able, I think based on my 10 years out, be able to apply some of that back internally because it's still along the same line. So what's revolutionary or what would be big and innovative is not standardizing, because in the government that causes a lot of heartache for our vendor partners, our industry partners. If we say, hey, we're only going on ServiceNow and that's it, right? Because you know, the Salesforce people are going to be all bummed out over that. And so
that would be another statement.
Yeah, and then, you know, it'll be in the press and it'll be a bunch of stuff and we didn't run the right competitive procurements and, you know, then we have, and so these rules are there for good reason, right? That something has happened along the way, so there's a good reason for it. But what we can do is become technology agnostic. And so some of this is really going back to basic software development. So think, you know, the SecDevOps model is really developing these applications, for example, going to the cloud and being able to manage this in a way where I'm managing the code, right? And so think of this back to the, you know, very old days of my beginnings in this, is it was like all about release management, configuration management. We got the source code, we could recompile it. It was the same type of thing. And so it didn't matter, right? Because we could move from platform to platform. That's what we're going to have to be able to do. So to your point about the chief data officer, the chief technology officer, we can't get so buried into a specific solution that it becomes cost prohibitive for us to be able to take advantage of new things. That's building that structure to allow us to be able to do that so that we can, you know, be able to shift the data among the components, because anyone who is dealing with the department knows that we have multiple platforms here. And so we shouldn't have to run into licensing issues. If the Chico has developed something that's really great, that's an app that can run in a cloud environment, we should be able to then, be able to translate it. And if they're using Salesforce versus ServiceNow, that we have enterprise licensing agreements in place that allow for that diffusion to happen, and that we're actually managing that. Okay, so some of those pieces, we need to be able to facilitate that. That infrastructure isn't here right now. Right. And that's what we're looking for, to be able to build out that so that we can really move to a technology agnostic platform and not get so wedded. This gets back into my history where we're wedded into specific technical solutions that are supporting specific business lines, and it makes it difficult for us to migrate off of them.
Yeah, yeah. So the dependency, move away from that.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to move to Q&A now because I'm getting a list, if you don't mind, from.
Sure.
Great. From Greg Brony, how do you think about the concerns around the NOC-SOC consolidation and the potential conflict of interest between the two, Do you see a conflict between the two?
No, actually, I don't see a conflict between the two. I really don't. I think some of the business models that are around the traditional business models around where our industry partners have supported one or the other, we're asking them to be more open-minded because this is the next evolution of services. We have to run 24/7. If you were in an energy company, right? So this is my experience in working with energy companies and things like that going forward is like, you just can't shut that down, right? You can't shut it down. And so you have to be able to enable operations, be able to have the right controls, so to speak, in place that allows you to monitor if something nefarious has happened and you're not really sure, so that you can then continue to move forward, because we're not going to be able to say, you know what, you can't have power to that part of the grid because we have to isolate it and figure out what actually is going on. No, you have to have power because of everything else that is happening. This gets along with the national response framework, the lifelines, how all this is going to work. Well, DHS is critical to being able to make sure that we're maintaining those services. So it really is, I think, as more and more departments look at this, as more and more industries look at it, it's the next evolution in cyber defense.
While meeting no-fail missions, which is a big deal.
Yes.
Yeah. All right, from James Leach, how did you become a CIO? Was it a career goal of yours or more random? And how is your leadership style and job performance influenced by being a woman?
Okay, so first off, the woman thing has nothing to do with where I ended up. At least I don't think so. I would say that I got into technology. If you look at my career, my career actually maps along with the development of the internet and how those capabilities have happened. So they didn't even have CIOs when I moved into technology. And so the whole concept of a CIO didn't exist until 1996. So I was, already in IT at that point, working on, and it was another duty as assigned. And so, like we had contracts at Department of Agriculture, and Ross Perot negotiated those initially. So I'm like dating myself right now here on a
I'm glad somebody else knows what TCP/IP means. That's good.
Yes, I do know what TCP/IP means. And I remember having the big argument about TCP/IP over gossip, right? And like, maybe we shouldn't be asking for these additional requirements right now because nobody's really developing them. And I can do the capability right now based on TCP/IP. And I also remember having the big discussions about IPv6 versus IPv4, and that it was security, now it's ubiquitous. So I remember having a lot of these debates. So there weren't CIOs, but when you ask, like, how did you gravitate into this? It was, I really believe that a lot of this has to do with my education. And I was looking at how do I want to progress along in my career? And the idea was like, I'm going to get my master's in business administration because no matter what we look at, you have to use technology, and it's all about what's the business. So I have to understand the business to be able to apply technology to the business, because there would be no way that a CIO, when they first started coming in, like you've seen them, you were CFO, like when they come in and do death by PowerPoint, like you're kind of like, what? And so there has to be a way to bridge between what is the mission, how much does it cost, and this is how technology can enable it. And I believe through my experience that I've had the ability to be able to bridge that dialogue, which has allowed me to be successful.
The business judgment around the technology use and its outcomes.
Yes.
What are the most important skills and experiences to do your job well? Is it technical expertise? This is along the lines of what you just said, knowledge of government, relationships with elected officials, and organizational and project management, just as examples.
So yes, 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 and yes. So, look, the challenges or the problem set. The problem is always the same problem, right? The way that I like to describe it is IT gives everyone the opportunity to highlight the management inefficiencies within an organization, because you're saying, okay, as a CEO, you want to become more efficient at a reduced cost and still meet the outcome. Well, when you implement an IT system, what ends up happening is all the decisions that you deferred to make, you did manual workarounds. And so an IT system ends up highlighting decisions that you kept deferring throughout the years because people were doing workarounds for them. So it's how do you articulate that? And then the further you go up the chain, the larger the scale becomes. It's still the same issue, right? It's, okay, I want to implement a certain technology solution because I believe it's going to make me more efficient. That's probably true if you have the hard business discussions about the decisions that you need to make to get to that outcome, and then how much risk you're willing to live. So it's the scale, and it's the ability to be able to communicate that. That's the same thing Congress. They're just another set of stakeholders that they're giving us the resources to be able to move forward, right? To achieve outcomes for the American people. That means I have to have that hard discussion. So to their point about, is it good project management? Is it good understanding of the technology? I think technology has evolved beyond, like, you have to really know the technology. I mean, it's good if you know it because you're technology people, then you got cred with them, right? But, and you have to have cred with them. But the piece is, if you're really clear about what the outcome is that you want to achieve, there's a technical solution to support it. Or if there isn't, like when I was previously working during the Bush administration, then industry will rise to the occasion and develop it. And you're seeing it right now with Project Warp Speed, right? Like, industry will rise to that occasion and develop what you need if you're clear on what you want to achieve.
Yep.
So understanding the government rules, I think you have to understand enough of the government rules so that you don't get in trouble. But if you're a good leader when you come in from private industry, then the piece is that you assess your landscape and your people, and you know who has what talent in order to be able to close the gaps for you.
A good leadership skill, never to lose. For sure.
Exactly, exactly.
So in an organization that is far-reaching and whose mission is ever-changing, this is from David Brown, how do you think about reskilling, upskilling, and retaining employees that are prepared to deliver now as well as into the future as the environment changes?
So I didn't plant that question, but that's a question that's near and dear to my heart because and I'm a very goals-oriented person. So this, you know, like it would surprise people, but it's all about the people. So I can have the best technology in place or the best solutions, but if I don't do and really think about the workforce going into the future, it doesn't really matter what tool sets we have in place. And so that's one of the reasons why I did the US Cyber Challenge, because the US Cyber Challenge is all about the people to get the right skill sets, because cyber's never going away. So any of us who have been in this field has been looking at this for years. Mine goes back to my first hacking incident at the Department of Justice in 1996. So I knew then, like, oh my goodness, right? And so it wasn't year 2000. Everybody kept going. I was thinking, like, I don't understand why year 2000 is a problem, because government, I was developing applications with 40-year loan terms. So we hit year 2000 a long time ago and saw a lot of stuff. So it is all about the people. So the one thing that the department is really doing, and I love to talk about this, is there is a system. We're working in partnership with the Chief Human Capital Officer, and it's called the Cyber Talent Management System, CTMS. But what Congress did was give us language authorization to actually recruit and be competitive with private industry. So the Chico office is calling it the DHS Cyber Security Service. And what it's actually going to do is take us out of Title V take a group of people out of Title V and move into Title VI, where our rules will apply. So we can do assessments and we can be competitive with private industry. And we can offer them based on their skill sets, right? A salary commensurate with private industry. And they don't have to know, gosh, it's a 2210 with a parenthetical that has to map to the NICE framework that says XYZ for network forensics analysis. That's how I have to search for it on USA Jobs. Okay, it's not like that. It really is, okay, I'm going to go in and do a series of assessments. And then we've done the mapping on the back end. And then the intent is that this pilot program should run, I believe, once the rules promulgate and how it goes. We intend to run a pilot, the department does, in the spring. And so I'm going to hire 40 people. CISA is going to hire, right now, I think the target is 100. And if it works the way I think it does, we probably will have people on board in the first cohort, I hope, like within the first month. And the demand will be huge, right, because it'll be all based on their skills. And then I have then internally a career path for them. I know exactly what their skill set is, and then I can map out the actual training and the jobs and the types of things that they need to do in order to continue to progress. So we've been working on that very diligently as well. And
a good prototype for the future for other agencies.
Exactly. And again, this gets back to CISA and our relationship and what CISA is doing for the workforce overall. Exactly.
Right. Next question. How has the department's IT priorities changed as a result of the pandemic, and what initiatives are you pursuing to accommodate the new realities along the lines that we talked about before?
So I don't know that the priorities have changed. I would say that the existing priorities have accelerated. Okay. And so things like, to your question that you asked earlier about analyzing the data and the movement to the cloud and the platform, that's accelerated. And so we did hold an offsite internally here, which was really very interesting because it was mixed media for us to be able to go through what can we reasonably accomplish in a year based on the priorities that the department has. So we're really looking at the apps and the SecDevOps piece as use cases to then accelerate, and how you do CDM and the cloud migration and the data center consolidation and our EIS migration, like those things, those are all there. They have to accelerate in order to be able to deal with this new environment. And then the NOSC, as we've talked about, how do we implement CDM in an accelerated way in the NOSC that then allows us to continuously diagnose and monitor what is happening in our cloud environment so that we can work with our partners in that area as it relates to these applications.
Excellent. I don't know, this is from Ali and Kofax, I believe, is how do you see the future of OneNet support? And will there be another solicitation for that work in the future? And if so, what all is expected to be included?
Well, OneNet was rolled up in our EIS procurement. And so all of that is associated with our migration off of the networks contract onto the EIS contract. So that plan is in place. What's driving that is the retirement of the networks contract. So I can't really say very much more about that right now, as we have completed our EIS piece and we're working with our CPO office as we continue to move through parts of that award that has happened.
Fully understood. How do you view managing in an enterprise view across such a diverse set of components? So getting back to how many mission sets you have to manage, how do you view being able to manage and lead across all of those in such a critical time?
So it depends on what they're talking about as it relates to the oversight, right? So there's multiple parts associated with this oversight and how to be a facilitator to get the component, the resources that they need, or ensuring that the component is actually executing against the resources that they requested, right? And so I do think that this is where my experience from working at the Office of Management and Budget and what was intended with several of the policies that went forward, so that you're really scoping the problem. So I'm back to where you and I were talking about, do we have an agreed upon outcome? Like, what problem are you solving? And do we have an agreed upon outcome? And then stepping that through to what is actually achievable given the way that the federal government does the budget. And so there are really robust management processes here, especially associated with once you get into execution in our acquisition review boards, and that's all the senior leadership across the board. So there's multiple pieces to that question. It's not just me. All the lines of business, but I complement a lot of what is happening with the procurements as well, and then trying to be able to anticipate some symptoms or signs that we see along the way. So there is things that is really exciting here that the Chief Technology Officer has put in place that directorate, and one of them is associated with the program health assessment that they do. So we have our high value asset list, but we also have our major acquisition list. And so, you know, there are major acquisitions that are on the high value asset list, but there are high value assets that aren't necessarily on the major acquisition list, right? Based on the thresholds. So those analysis, our analysis happens and feeds into that process. So that dashboard and really looking at how that dollars work, and then part of the execution, that's all managed out of here, and that oversight is managed out of here, but it's really making sure we understand what the components are trying to achieve.
Perfect. One last very quick question before the voice of God comes on, and that is around innovation. How is industry performing and providing innovation, and is there any one or two areas that you would like to see industry be more innovative and present more to you?
So I love this question because I like to throw it back to, what do you actually mean by innovation? So I'm gonna throw it to you as a CEO, right? Like, is it really, when you think of innovation, is it the integration of new technologies that are out there, or is it new innovative ways to use the existing investment that I already have to like really change some of the business processes that are here within the department? So I'll give you a great example. So HSPD 12 has been around for years. I mean, I know that, I started it, right? That's a great place where industry rose to the occasion, developed technology that would allow us to put things on the card and be able to do stuff. Well, in this particular environment, what has happened is we've now been able to improve and be very innovative in the way that we're using that technology that allows us never to miss a beat with onboarding new employees, but still giving them the credentials, right? So the idea of derived credentials and contactless integration into the environment, those all were things that, like, oh yeah, technically you could do that, but did we really need to be able to do that? And so that whole innovative way of being able to use our certificates and being able to sign documents have been challenging our general counsels throughout the components, and saying, like, you know, what constitutes a legal document? If I do X, Y, Z, and you know that this credential was issued by X, Y, and Z, which was always the vision of what HSPD 12 was supposed to do, and have the reciprocity and be able to do it. It's not like we didn't have legislation. It's not like we didn't have the technology to do it, but the innovation associated with the business process, I think that's a lot of promise. And as you see, you know what you've deployed in a lot of the components. I think the opportunity is now for you to present innovative ways that they can use the deployments that they have already to really realize the promise of that particular technology.
So I'm out of time. Thank you for your time with us today.
Oh, I appreciate the opportunity. It was great. It really did feel like a fireside chat with you. Thank you.